What if the dusty machine sitting under a drop cloth in your basement, the one everybody in your family calls grandma's old thing, is worth more than the car parked in your driveway? 10 of these forgotten machines have quietly sold for hundreds, some for thousands, and one of them is so common that it is probably sitting in a closet within walking distance of where you are right now. One machine, tied to a name you already know, has sold for enough to cover a year of rent. And the line between the junk pile and the jackpot is hiding in a place almost nobody thinks to look. Let's find out if the valuable one is already in your house. Here's the part nobody tells you at the yard sale. Age does not equal value. A machine can be 90 years old, heavy as a boat anchor, and still be worth exactly what the metal would fetch at the scrapyard. Value doesn't come from how old something looks or how impressive it feels to lift. It comes from the model, the condition, the extras that survived with it, and one small detail stamped or painted somewhere on the body that most people walk right past. Learn to read that detail, and a machine your family was about to leave at the curb can suddenly pay for a vacation. Let me be straight with you the way a real appraiser would, because I've seen people talk themselves into fantasies, and I've seen people throw away fortunes out of pure boredom. Your machine is almost certainly not a one-of-a-kind piece built for royalty that shatters records at a European auction house. Those exist, and we'll talk about one before we're done, but they are the rarest of the rare, the kind of thing that surfaces once a decade and makes headlines precisely because it never happens. What matters for you tonight is the much bigger, much more interesting truth. Real. Ordinary-looking machines, the kind sitting under a sheet in a garage or wedged behind Christmas decorations in an attic, are quietly selling for hundreds and thousands of dollars every single week. And most of their owners have absolutely no idea what they're standing next to. This isn't a video about rare miracles. It's a video about the machines that are hiding in plain sight in the homes of people who never thought to look twice. Number one on this list might already be sitting 3 feet from where you're watching this, close enough to touch, dusty enough to have been ignored for years. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at every old machine in your family differently. Number 10, the Wilcox and Gibbs. If you've ever come across a small machine with a strange, almost sculptural curved arm, shaped less like a tool and more like a piece of iron jewelry, your first instinct is probably to assume it's broken or a toy, or simply too odd to be real. That instinct is exactly backwards. This is one of the most quietly desired machines among serious collectors, prized precisely because it looks like nothing else ever built. Its chain stitch mechanism was patented in the 1850s, and the design barely changed for half a century, which is part of why it still turns heads today. Depending on condition and completeness, these have sold anywhere from under $100 to well past $400. Here's your test tonight. Flip the fabric over and look at the underside of any stitch it left behind. A true chain stitch machine leaves a looping, braided pattern on the back, almost like knitting instead of the flat interlocked line a standard machine produces. Braid on the back, no bobbin case underneath, curved iron arm. That combination means you're not looking at a toy. You're looking at a machine collectors specifically hunt for. And here's the detail most people miss entirely. These machines were often mounted on small wooden bases with a hand crank rather than a treadle, which makes them look even more like children's playthings to an untrained eye. Collectors actually prefer that configuration because the base and crank are exactly the pieces that get lost or broken over a century of storage. A complete example with its original base, crank handle, and threading path intact will always out-earn a bare mechanism sitting loose in a drawer. This is exactly the kind of piece that gets handed over for $5 at an estate sale because nobody paused long enough to recognize the shape. Number 9. The tiny hand crank machines tucked away with the Christmas decorations. Almost every family that owned a full-size machine a century ago also had a miniature version, given to a daughter to learn on, small enough to fit in a shoebox, and it looks at first glance exactly like a toy. That assumption is where the money gets lost. A plain working miniature typically brings somewhere between $70 and $150, but a complete example, one that still has its original fitted box, its tiny clamp for attaching it to a tabletop, and its instruction card, has climbed past $250, and the best examples have gone well beyond that. Your test is simple. Don't just look at the machine. Look for the box and the clamp. The machine by itself is a curiosity that decorates a shelf. The machine with everything it came with is the one that pays for itself many times over. Number 8. The Singer Class 15 and the decals decide everything. This workhorse model became one of the most widely produced machines of its era, and it's the design that introduced features still copied in machines built today. The nicer American-made versions carry an ornate gold and red floral decal pattern that collectors specifically hunt for by name. A machine with that pattern intact, sitting in its original treadle cabinet, has sold anywhere from $300 to $800. But here's the trap, and it catches more people than any other mistake on this list. That exact same machine, repainted with a fresh replica decal slapped over the original, will often struggle to clear $50. Collectors aren't paying for shininess. They're paying for authenticity. Your test? Hold it under a strong lamp and look closely at the gold. Original decal work, even faded, chipped, and 70 years worn, will always beat a glossy repaint. A machine that was never touched up is worth more precisely because it wasn't touched. Number 7, and I need to slow down here because this is the mistake I see more than any other. You find a heavy black machine in a cabinet, dust an inch thick on the lid, and your heart starts racing. I respect you enough to give you the honest version instead of the exciting one. Millions upon millions of plain black machines were manufactured across multiple companies for well over a century, and the vast majority of them, no matter how old or how heavy, are worth somewhere between $50 and $150. Old does not mean rare. Heavy does not mean valuable. Those are just descriptions, not price tags. There is still something worth doing before you write it off completely. Turn the hand wheel. Thread it up if you can. Machines built 80, 90, even 100 years ago will very often still sew a clean, straight line today, smoother than some plastic machines fresh off a store shelf. That tells you something about how it was built. It does not tell you what it's worth. Only the model, the finish, and the number stamped into the bed can answer that question. Number 6. The machine collectors nickname the quiet workhorse. To an untrained eye, it looks like just another black machine with gold lettering. It isn't. This particular model, introduced in the middle of the 20th century, was engineered to be the smoothest, most precise, straight stitch machine its maker had ever produced. And it found its way into professional tailoring shops and costume departments because of how reliably it performed under heavy daily use. The premium version has a geared motor built directly into the body instead of the usual external belt, which means no slipping, no stretching, no replacement parts wearing out over decades. A clean example of the head alone sells for $200 to $500, and a complete machine in its original cabinet has pushed toward $900. Your test: look for that built-in motor housing instead of an external belt-driven motor bolted to the side, and check the base for a small commemorative badge, which some runs carried to mark a manufacturing milestone. That badge is a quiet signal that you're holding one of the better production years. Before we get to the top 5, notice the pattern forming here. The machines actually worth real money almost never look expensive. They end up in the $50 pile at the estate sale precisely because their owners assumed old and heavy meant worthless and in the way. Appearance keeps lying to people over and over, generation after generation. What actually decides value is a short, learnable list. The model, the finish, the decals, whether it's complete, and the serial number stamped into the metal. Those are things you can teach yourself to spot in under a minute, which is exactly why I put together a simple companion checklist covering the models, the marks, and the numbers that separate the $50 pile from the real find. It's linked below if you want it. Now, back to the countdown. Number 5, the early rotary hook machines from the great Singer rival. Before one company swallowed nearly the entire American sewing machine industry in the early 1900s, it had a genuine rival, a company whose engineers invented mechanisms still used in nearly every machine built since, including the rotary hook and the 4-motion feed that lets fabric advance smoothly under the needle. A later model from this maker, sitting in a nice quarter sawn oak cabinet, realistically brings $400 to $600, and the earliest surviving examples climb considerably higher than that. Your test: read the nameplate carefully and check the number against the date the company was absorbed by its larger competitor. If the machine predates that buyout, you are holding a piece of the company that beat the industry giant at its own game before eventually being bought out entirely. Number 4, and here the numbers start to jump. A company out of Boston built one of the very first truly portable machines in the 1850s, a compact, self-contained unit that folded into its own carrying box so it could travel from room to room, something almost unheard of at the time. Restored examples of these early portables have sold for well over $1,000, and at one specialty auction, a single example sold as part of a larger estate collection for more than $2,000. Your test: look for a 2-thread chain stitch mechanism and a machine that came housed in its own fitted wooden carrying box rather than a separate cabinet. That combination of age, portability, and original housing is what pushes the price into 4 figures. But it gets bigger than a portable box machine from the 1850s, and it comes down, every single time, to a number almost nobody bothers to actually read. Number 3 isn't a machine at all. It's a hidden clock. And it's the single most useful thing you'll learn in this entire video. Nearly every machine has a serial number stamped somewhere into the bed, the arm, or a small metal plate on the front. Turn the machine around and actually read it. If the number is a plain string of digits with no letter attached, you are very likely looking at a 19th century machine, and that is exactly the moment you should feel your pulse pick up. If there's a letter followed by numbers, you're almost certainly looking at 20th century production. Several free online serial number databases run by sewing machine collector communities will date almost any machine's number in under a minute. No expert required. But look closer before you get excited. If someone has scratched, filed down, or drilled straight through that number plate, the machine likely left the factory as a factory second, a flawed run sold at a discount. And it will be worth noticeably less no matter how good it looks otherwise. Most people glance at a jumble of numbers, shrug, and set the machine back down. That jumble is a signed and dated confession. You only have to be willing to read it. Number 2, and this one quietly costs people more money than almost anything else on this list, because the value was never only in the machine. A bare machine head, sold on its own, is worth a fraction of that same machine sitting inside its original case alongside the tray of attachments, the spare bobbins, the little oil can, and the instruction manual. Collectors want the complete outfit, not an orphaned piece of it. A lone head reads as incomplete, no matter how good the mechanism inside still is. Here's what almost nobody checks before selling. Open the case. Is the attachment box still tucked into its corner? Did the manual, maybe with a previous owner's handwriting inside the cover, survive along with it? Those small, easy-to-overlook pieces can double the price of the exact same machine. Before you sell anything, find the case and everything that was ever packed inside it. More money gets lost to a broken-up outfit than to almost any other mistake collectors see, because someone kept the pretty machine on display and quietly tossed the dull little box of parts in the trash, throwing away half the value with their own 2 hands. Number 1, and it is almost certainly a machine you already own, or one you can picture sitting on a shelf at a relative's house right now. It's small, black, portable enough to carry in one hand inside its own fitted case that looks almost like a doctor's bag, eyed with delicate gold scrollwork decorating the body. It debuted at a World's Fair in the early 1930s, and the company that built it manufactured well over 1 million of them over the following decades. Your kids probably call it old-fashioned. Part of you has probably started to believe them. Here's the truth that flips this entire list on its head. Because so many were made, the ordinary black version isn't rare in the traditional sense. And yet, quilters and sewists chase it so relentlessly, prizing its lightweight portability and rock-solid stitch quality, that even a completely common example regularly sells for $300 to $900, far outpacing that heavy treadle machine sitting all the way back at number 7. Fame isn't the same thing as rarity, but demand moves the price just as hard as rarity does, sometimes harder, and the real money hides in the variants. A small number of these portables were produced during wartime with a rough, matte wrinkle finish instead of the usual glossy black, made in only a couple of short production runs before the factory switched back. Collectors have documented only a few dozen surviving examples worldwide, and in top original condition, one of these wartime variants has sold for well over $5,000. So here's your final test tonight, and it's the exact same skill every single machine on this list was quietly teaching you the whole time. Turn it over. Read the number. Check the finish, smooth and glossy, or that rare matte wrinkle. Check that the case, the attachments, and the manual are all still tucked inside where they belong. Every entry on this list came down to that one habit, repeated 10 times in 10 different ways. Turn it over, read the number, believe what the metal tells you instead of what your family keeps telling you. The name stamped on the front is the story everybody repeats without thinking. The number underneath is the actual truth. Everything worth real money tonight was plain, heavy, and easy to walk right past without a second glance. And every bit of that value was decided by a handful of digits that almost nobody ever bothers to read. So, before you carry a single machine out to the curb, before you let anyone talk you into a scrap metal price over the phone, before you decide that the old machine in the closet is just an old machine and nothing more, turn it over first. If this made you want to walk straight to that closet right now and start flipping machines upside down, do me one favor and hit like on this video before you go. And if you haven't subscribed yet, that's exactly where the next one is waiting. The one where we do the same walkthrough for the old cameras and typewriters gathering dust on that very same shelf. Then, tell me in the comments, what's the oldest machine sitting in your house and who did it originally belong to? I read every single one. And one last thing, and I mean this sincerely, don't sell a single machine before you read the number. Number 1 is probably sitting in your closet right now. Go turn it over.